This man got away with his horrific crimes for 27 years. Oh, hi there, stranger. This is part 46 of the England's Whole Lifers series, so viewer discretion is advised. Extra trigger warning, this case does involve the unalivings of children. Extra trigger warning, today's case is going to piss you off. The year was 1982 and Norma Richards was a 27-year-old mother of 3 girls who were 9, 7 and 4 years old. She lived in Dalston, northeast London, with her long-term partner, Keith Cunningham. Keith, at the time of the events, was in Spain with his brother, Laurie. On a mid-July evening, when Norma's youngest daughter was spending the night at her grandmother's house, Norma had gone out socialising and enjoying herself with her friends, later returning home to her 2 older daughters. She was either approached or followed by a man. He either offered to walk her home or followed her there. That part is unclear. But once inside the home, Norma was attacked by this man ferociously. He arred her and impaled her with a sharp object until she passed away. It's believed that during the course of the attack, either one or both of the little girls were woken up by the noise. The man would take the lives of both little girls and then leave their bodies in the bathtub. It's believed that he did this to prevent them from identifying him. He then drew or painted NF on the doors of the home, which stands for National Front. This was in an effort to make the attack appear to be racially motivated. The horrific scene would be discovered by Norma's 4-year-old daughter and the grandmother that she had been staying with. Tragically, police had no leads and the investigation stalled. The crime was left unsolved and eventually went cold for a long time. Until 2009, to be exact, when writer Peter Law was doing research for a book that he was writing, which was about Keith Cunningham's brother, Laurie. You see, Laurie Cunningham was a footballer who had played for West Bromwich Albion and Real Madrid. Laurie was also the first black footballer to represent England in an international competitive match. He was also the first ever English player to be signed for Real Madrid. And so Peter Law was writing a book on the impact that Laurie Cunningham had had on English football when he decided to get an update on what had happened to Keith's family and see if the perpetrator had ever been caught. And it was that inquiry by Peter Law that brought about a review. The police ran the DNA from the scene in 1982 through their database and bingo, they got a match. And that is, of course, fantastic. And I'm so glad that it happened. But if it hadn't have been for Peter Law, would it have happened? How long before they did it could they have done it? This was now 27 years after the horrific unalivings of Norma and 2 of her daughters. And their man was Wilbert Dyce, whose mother had lived just yards away from Norma Richards in 1982. It's believed Dyce was briefly acquainted with Keith Cunningham, however he was never questioned in connection to the unalivings. Even though Dyce was a long-time sexual predator and had committed another SA in 1982. That victim had told her boyfriend what had happened, who had slapped Dyce a couple of times, and Dyce had just repeatedly apologised, never once denying what he had done. In fact, Wilbert Dyce had committed his first R when he was just 15 years old. Another woman was attacked by him in 1986 inside her own home. He had followed her into her home and arred her at knife point in the presence of her baby whilst she was pregnant with her 2nd child. He assaulted that same lady later on in her pregnancy, again at knife point. This guy is inhuman. He had also been married for 18 years and had put his wife through hell. The worst thing about all of this is, strangers, is that he didn't just get away undetected with all of those crimes. When he was 15, he was convicted. Again, a few years after that, he was convicted of SA and attempted M. And yet he was out and free by the age of 26, able to do what he did to Norma and her 2 babies. He would be arrested for the unalivings of Norma and her 2 daughters, but denied having committed the crimes. He explained that his DNA was present because he had had intercourse with Norma earlier that evening in the bathroom of a nightclub. Still disrespecting that lady nearly 30 years after he took her life. He went on trial in November 2010, and with the physical evidence plus testimony from witnesses, including his ex-wife, bravo to her, he was found guilty of the 3 unalivings and sentenced to a whole life order. 28 years after committing the crimes. When are we going to have adequate sentencing for SAs and Rs? He shouldn't have even been free when he did what he did to Norma and her kids. And of course, being the early 80s and being black victims, it just makes me wonder if the police did really do everything they could at the time. I'm not saying they didn't, I'm just saying I hope they did. Thank the gods for Peter Law asking that question in 2009, because Wilbert Dyce might have got away with that forever. Dyce was 54 at the time of his conviction, and to my knowledge he is still serving out his time. Norma Richards, of course, is forever 27, and her babies are forever 7 and 9. And that is the horrific case of Wilbert Dyce. Rest in peace to Norma Richards and her 2 babies. Like so many times before on this list, I wonder if we've got the full story of what this guy did. Another question I wondered about is if they would take that DNA and compare it to other cold cases from like where he lived at the time and things like that. I do think that he probably had more victims, but I don't know if they do that or what their protocol is. I also wonder how many cold cases are out there that could be solved if they're just urged to look again. As ever, please let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, if you've stayed with me up until now, then thank you for watching, and I will see you for the next one.